Welcome to Speakeasy!
You can tell this is the last one.
Yeah, it's the last Speakeasy of the semester, which is both good and bad. Bad because there's no more Speakeasy. Good because there's more time for all of you graduate students to finish the things that you have due for the rest of the semester.
Which we will not remind you of at all for the rest of this reading.
That was it. That's it. Yeah, I think that's it. We have a really exciting program because we have 5 readers tonight because it's the last one, so it's a little special. So we're going to have a little break after the 3rd reader, about 10 minutes, recharge our imaginations, our attention spans.
Eat more food.
Get some more beer, some more cookies. If you didn't already get beer or cookies, they're back there and you can sneak on through as we introduce the first reader before she starts. Anything else?
I guess it's just the sign-in sheet.
That's Kim. Kim's sitting over there.
I was so unenthusiastic about the sign-in sheet. Don't you want this beer and cookies?
Yeah, so the department helps us buy the beer and the cookies, and so there's a sign-in sheet that will go around, which if you could please sign will help us continue to get funding for the goodies.
Yeah. Also, we have a microphone. Feel free to use it or not at your own discretion. I know not everybody is comfortable with a microphone, but for those who feel that it would help their reading, it is here for you. Thank you, Joey.
I also forgot to tell Joey to bring the cord that lets my phone plug into it for the walk-up songs. So we're going to do that thing that we did last time where I just play it off of my phone. But I'm going to be sitting there instead of all the way over here, so hopefully it'll feel louder and more present than it did last time. Which is hopefully something that in the course of the winter break we will get sorted out better.
Yeah.
But that's okay. In other news, I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's get this show started.
So Kim Grabowski is our first reader, and she likes to call herself a poet and a horsewoman, but actually she means that she is part horse. Her ideal job would be somehow getting paid to cuddle her dog, a boxer and pit bull mix named Olive, who's afraid of shadows. She has some poems in some places, and a chapbook titled Afterward coming out from Dancing Girl Press in 2016. She apologizes in advance for how intensely Midwestern her speech patterns are. Kim Grabowski.
I had to walk up so far. Alright. Okay, so I apologize also not only for my Midwesternness, but also the fact that I'm reading this off my phone like an asshole because I did not have time to print them out. Even though I totally did. I was here 45 minutes early. I could have been printing my poems, but... So yeah, I apologize for that. So because everything else I'm reading is kind of depressing, I'm going to read my poem that has antidepressants in the title first, even though it's still kind of depressing. But the title of this is straight off of just like an internet article whose headline I just kind of stole. Okay. Everything points to antidepressants in the soil. We've been looking toward the sky for too long, pretending clouds take the shape of our lives to teach us how many ways have we protected ourselves, how many blistered palms. Just cover your eyes, mouth around a member. Love, how long have you spent trying to make yourself presentable? I saw a list the other day, and at the end a question, what else doesn't have gender? In what other ways does a skull signal how a human lived? I understand how time wears, but not the way it buries. The quiet muffling of overlay. How long until archaeology digs up your body? And which questions will we have left? I once drank vodka out of a plastic water bottle with an American soldier in the parking lot of a haunted house. When he was afraid, he laughed loudly. The ghosts understood him and let him be. It was not so with me. Okay. And speaking of my really crazy little dog, so the next poem is called Bone Thesis, which has like a funny story behind it, but it is also depressing because I was reading Richard Seiken when I wrote it. But every time my dog is chewing on her bone, we say that she's working on her bone thesis. Yeah, so that's like totally unrelated background. Okay, bone thesis. To say nothing of my methods, I wanted to know what is left behind, a solid part. Clear plastic of the pill bottle and its rattling. The letter I begin to write. I think distances, maybe. Immortal internet through lines. My search history. And what if nothing was ever broken? And what if the light moving into our basement rooms was enough to keep us alive? My friend says, write it about some rare disease. The taste of disappointment powdered. Step-by-step instructions on how to distill the hydrocodone from the acetaminophen. Cool tile floor. Who did not pick up the telephone? Did you leave a message? Make no sound. Boy rocking me back and forth. And how much have I asked of this world? He smells his hands to check for blood. It is a question of fault. The rocking meant as reminder, body moving through space and time. He seems skeptical we could open this other dimension. I see through the vapor. The bottle burst open in my blood. Of all I have taken. Drink in this charcoal atonement. Something written there on the bone. How the dog knows to gnaw. This persistence. Okay. So, this is my 2-poem warning. That's a thing now. So this next one, my mom is really obsessed with murder, which I feel like I've talked to everyone in this program about at some point or another. But I was reading, so this poem is after Lightsey Darst, her book Find the Girl. And there's a poem in it about JonBenet Ramsey, and I was just, thinking to myself, oh, I wonder how much, what age she would be if she were alive right now, how much older I am than her, because I remember everything from it so vividly, and watching the trial on TV. And then it turned out she's my exact age, so the little 6-year-old me was very, very privy to all of the JonBenet Ramsey stuff. Okay. So this is after Lightsey Darst and also Diane Seuss. Prayer for JonBenet. Dear God, tonight I searched how much older I would be than JonBenet Ramsey, but instead found her just my age. And how do you decide who among us should be beautiful? And do you think it a blessing? No, this is something you decide yourselves. Prayer that goes, begin with the pearl, God. I think, what is inside, grist for this mill? Prayer that goes, dear God, outlined in baby's breath. I can't help but think this punishment for softness. Describe to me the sound of JonBenet's voice at 16, her hands clutching the wheel of a car, her first. Prayer that goes, we are both 6 years old, eating pineapple with spoons in an immense kitchen. She promises she will show me her crowns, maybe let me wear them. But even then, God, anything that wears a crown is marked. Prayer that goes, JonBenet's ghost and I are 25, wearing nail polish named 1/4 cent cherry. We are both ravaged this time. She has glided through with her wrists tied. When we were both 6, she tried to bite mine apart, set me free. I know so much about killing now, God, but a girl is only meant to know how to be killed. Woohoo! Okay. So my last one, So the horsewoman thing, I'm always trying to write about horses, but it's really hard because I feel like I'm too close, so nothing is cool and magical anymore. But I tried. This is my try, and maybe the only one that I'll ever have. Okay. It's called Myth About Horses. Grown into part girl, part horse, from thinking about bodies so often, from fusing with the horses, said horse is an excess of body, a sight of so much body. I went to the bar with a friend who is not horse but swallow, would pick up and carry small pieces of hay from the floor to build her nest, always building nest, bursting thirsty, offered me drink after drink and I gulped it down. I was becoming hoarse with a blind spot at the straight ahead of vision. I did not choose to leave the bar with the boy. I imagine myself led at the end of a rope. It is imagining that keeps horses at the end of a rope. Do not know we are strong, not about the size of hearts, hardness of hands. The boy made me touch him, wanted me to sleep with him, but underestimated how much of me was horse. I worried the touching. The myth about horses, we have no nerve endings in our manes. The myth about horses, we are wild and free. The boy pulled my hair, it hurt, but I did not tell him to stop. I know, don't overuse a word. My bones were thick, I had never had soundness issues. A horse is said to be cast when she has lain down or rolled, managed to position herself with her legs so close to the stall wall she can neither get up nor reposition herself to roll the other way. Thank you.
Insert weekly joke about having to get it out from behind the camera. Alright, so I get to introduce not only our next reader, but one of my Speakeasy co-hosts, Sam Corfman. So Sam has a twin brother who's going to become a fancy lawyer, but still constantly suggests Sam is the more impressive twin. In my opinion, poet more impressive than lawyer. You got this. When home for Thanksgiving, Sam's mother suggested that the extended family would enjoy hearing a poetry reading, which he thought was a bad idea. But you can tell him later if you think the drunk cousin he hadn't seen in 6 years would have appreciated it. Oh, and he has some poems in some places and a chapbook manuscript that was a finalist for a thing, but is still on the lookout for a home that you should ask him about. Ask him about it. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Corfman.
So that has really nothing to do with what I'm going to read. So that's the thing. Kid, the tell is not the way you dress, but whether or not you say no. Is it a luxury to outgrow desire, blue lace? A filter across the door. Hammer certain nails on to slip through. Clear over flesh looks painted pink. Shrink wrap your skin away. Remember the game in which you were chased but never caught? Where if you stopped running, you could keep the distance you'd earned? Keep playing that one, long after the boys stop chasing you on the playground. Oh kid, your parents are crying over what your face will do to the world. Not your face, some screen in front of it that communicates. So those of you who have seen me read before have probably seen me talk a lot as I read. And I just sort of decided to read these right now. And these poems are from a series called Luxury Blue Lace that for whatever reason doesn't seem to want me to talk about it. So I'm just going to read a couple of them and then I'll read a longer poem at the end. Boy in wolf's clothing, but the pelt is pink and trimmed with busy patterned fabric. It twirls with the boy. Ask him. Somebody makes sangria. Somebody says this is a problem. Wolf's clothing will not warm like natural hide. But if pelts are pretty, he will sacrifice and shiver, because hide will stretch, but pain the side under ribs, will not let him give way, will keep a memory of a twirl long after it has shredded. Child, less a companion, why do you wear this dress? Keep acting this way and you will weight your DNA, stones to shift and crystallize your expressions. I have only eroded the hand I strike with, a whale skeleton, a string of lights hung for a party. You twice had to carve out an inside. Feel the weather in each cave. Outside rain mixes with your tensioned surface. Your twin taught himself to make everything an inside, to cope in a fold. If he wanted to trade his body for networks, commands, You wanted silk veils, folded so that your body seemed whole. Time will take away your excuses. Seemed in that poem is spelled S-E-A-M-E-D. Just like feels punnier when I have to explain it. And the next part is an excerpt from a Jessica Fisher poem called Winter. I fell from the window, that is to say, I was inside, then not. What else to say? No, not a door, not a path leading. I promise you won't get through me to my brother and know him. No one told you yet we're not even looking, just bored. No one ever wrote you a letter, careworn. If one twin is diagnosed, there's a 50% chance the identical twin will also develop symptoms. So you keep reminding me, but I promise I'm well aware of what gets thrown between us. How arbitrary 50% is. I'm an unwilling participant in this study. I can't talk about when I wanted a different body, but I can threaten you, dear scientists, can wake up every day asking which one of you thinks I'm perfect, show up and prove everyone wrong. I learned to walk incorrectly. I am noticeable in a crowd if the crowd moves. Distinguishable from an impression. There is more give for giving today, who call it swagger. Whose swagger? Too much hip for a boy, less than a man. Does walking mean walking a runway to put oneself on show? Sometimes I invent a more straightforward stride, landing not one in front of the other, but in two lines. Doesn't it hurt you to run, to land so heavily? It hurts to force apart a line. A way is opened, a hole is made. That last line is a line of Young Me, Kim's, that I just stole. Tulle and taffeta rust, left alone. Even on land, they attract sharks. Dear one, rags are unbecoming unless you want them there. Tell me how to read them like the dregs of everyday Earl Grey, how to find that soloist's pirouette in the scraps. Here are 3 signs. 1, I am. 2, I hate. 3, I should have been. Fill out a third of the application correctly. This is the comfortable trap, the metal of it singing and clicking, evidence and claim to fabricate them into being. I wanted magic and the chance to fix a mistake without changing, without the pain of moving through air and time. But then it would have been an experiment, or it was anyway, and I failed. I am trying not to fail. Okay, and the other poem that I'm going to read is not as long, but I have a friend who's a studio artist, who's a ceramic artist, and we swap art stuff a lot, and she recently just sort of was like, by the way, I started making some of your words out of clay. I was like, what? What do you mean? And she was like, oh, I started sculpting them in my ceramic studio. And I was like, okay, cool. You should keep doing that. So this is the poem that she stole some lines from that she's in the process of making out of clay. To be a lake among oceans. Here's an ending, when before it ends, we all go to the beach. Remind me why that house was called a ziggurat, because it was dark. Jetsam floated through the air. Stardust was a drug. I stopped trying to come up with a color for the water, closed my eyes every time I went under, and pretended that I was on vacation from that vacation. I'd fallen in love with something I left, moved to a desert founded on the promise of an ocean and never night, broken the first night that fell. I fled to the woods, to an oiled gravel, and waves again found me, moving in and out. I pretended it was calming, but felt turbidity, looked instead up at what was overpowered, by the sparks of late summer, by the smoke. Again and again, my love was mocked from the opposite sides, where they tout their smooth sounds and greater vowels, their connection to another island. We have depth too, I said, opening my mouth in the ripples. We have places where I make my own light. Returning one more time from the salt mine to the oasis, I didn't want such sediment in the arms that held me. I'll take the coded warning and stay on the sand, waiting for the band to lift. Near the shore, this water is warm enough to sleep in. We stretch our arms and reach the length of a city. We walk only a mile. One morning, there was the lake suddenly, like an ocean. A different morning, there was the ocean. There were the angles scattered like skyscrapers along a running path. I biked everywhere, although I didn't remember how. Sand or heat were in the way, each a barrier to the connection of waters. I was a winding, a leap from a rocky pier, no longer feeding. There are other ways to enter. Thank you. And with that, back in my other role as Speakeasy host, we'll take like a 10-minute break before we come back for our last two readers. So you should get some more cookies or beer or buy a book. And then we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Welcome back to our program. So I am the luckiest person in the world because I get to introduce not one of my Speakeasy co-hosts, but both of my Speakeasy co-hosts. So our next reader is Courtney Luk, and she has given us a setup where she tells us about her past and her present. Past Courtney. Speaking is not easy for her. She attended speech therapy on a weekly basis for 9 torturous years starting in kindergarten. The worst was when she had to put a feather in front of her mouth and make the feather move 10 times in a row by saying, "the." That sounds absolutely terrible. She had to make many attempts, none of which were successful. Her record was 9 until her speech therapist gave up. Let's hope for something happier. Present Courtney. Her pug, W.S. Wrinkles, is the love of her life, even though all he does is sleep, eat, and burrow his face into people's crotches. That sounds uncomfortable. Courtney got a crock pot on Black Friday, the appliance of her life, only second to the Vitamix that she'll never be able to afford. Crock pots are awesome. But she'll continue to leave her food processor next to her blender in hopes that a Vitamix knockoff will appear one morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Courtney Luk.
Hi! Thank you guys for coming. It's so nice. And we're in a nice setting, not paying attention to anything but books. Alright, so I wanted to read a piece that I wrote about a year and a half ago before I entered the program. But then it was really long and I didn't want Malcolm to be mad at me. So I shortened it and took out a lot of bits here and there so it sounds... There's a ghost. I brought... He's my friend. He's chilling out over there. Just leave him alone.
You don't have to worry about them. I'll do them later.
Yeah. So... I took out a lot of pieces, so if it sounds really jumpy, that's why, but I tried to cut things out in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to start in the middle, but in the beginning, there's this character, she just sleeps with guys that she meets, and that's why her friends call her the succubus, and she leaves at night and she doesn't care about anyone but herself. Alright, so I'm going to start in the middle. All I wanted was coffee. No cream, no sugar, no fancy toppings or chai, whatever, but the barista thought he was so suave in his green apron and visor. Black coffee for Miss Ariel. A lovely name you have. I raised an eyebrow wondering if he'll ever pass high school, let alone get into college. It's Ariel. You spelled my name wrong. I'm not a mermaid. What a relief, because a girl like you should never lose her legs. What would the world do without them? The same shit they've been doing, getting on with their lives. People lose their legs every day. It was a compliment. He chuckled too much to the point of a high squeal. I rolled my eyes and grabbed the paper cup from the counter. No tip, Ariel? I turned my head quicker than I wanted, whipping auburn hair over bare shoulder. You give out cheap compliments for free, and you want a tip for that? Or is it for pressing a button to put some coffee into a cup? Kid didn't say anything as I walked through the door, wishing I'd worn long jeans or even 90s overalls, but the June weather demanded otherwise. I felt hot liquid pour onto my chest and down my shirt instead of my throat. I dropped the cup and looked up to find a perfectly sculpted, horrified face. "I'm so sorry, miss, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" He sputtered, kneeling down to pick up the cup. It was just a cup. Why would I need that now, I thought. A dark puddle began to form around my only pair of pink sandals, a reservoir for a 5'9" waterfall, almost a mermaid. "I'm okay, my clothes aren't, and I have no more coffee," I answered more deadpan than annoyed. "I'm so sorry, please, let me help you find some napkins or something." The man had to be in his mid to late 20s. His eyes were large with apprehension, and his toned biceps stiffened as he held his hands out toward me. Another victim. "No, it's okay. I'm just gonna go home and change because I can no longer walk these streets without eyebrows arching like mountaintops." "I'm really sorry, miss. At least let me walk you back. You live far? If I did, would you still walk home, or would you make an excuse like you lost your dog and have to go find him within a 3-block radius?" His snicker was completely inappropriate for the situation. Coffee was outside my body rather than inside. "I take the subway with you. It is my fault that you have to go home after all. You're clearly headed somewhere." "As you are," I said, gesturing to his presence outdoors. "A friend's place to help him move. I'll let him know I'll be late." I was looking forward to getting a vinyl, but I guess that will have to wait. "So I'll take you home?" "Excuse me?" He was quick. "What? No, sorry, again. I meant that I'll walk you home so you're not alone when eyebrows look like mountains." He smiled, hands burrowing their way into his front pockets. "You're lucky. I'm a couple blocks up." I pointed behind me. "I wouldn't consider that lucky. You seem like good company." We started toward my apartment on Bleecker Street. "How so?" "Well, you haven't freaked out at me for spilling warm coffee all over you." "That wouldn't get these stains off, would it?" "No, but still appreciated. Can I pay for the dry cleaning?" "You mean take my clothes to a spa instead of myself?" "I don't think so." I rolled my eyes behind closed lids. "Understandable. Dinner?" "What?" He held out his hand. "I'm sorry, my name's Trey." "And what does that have to do with what you just said?" "Sorry, you didn't seem to want to take the offer, so I changed the subject." "You apologize for everything, don't you?" "Sorry, I'll stop." He shuffled his sneakers along the sidewalk. "Ariel." "My name." "It's a lovely name, Ariel." "So I've heard." We approached my apartment complex, an off-white crumbling structure. It was old but quite sturdy, as deceiving as its appearance was. Trey kicked at the pavement by the bottom step. "I still feel bad about ruining your clothes." "As you should. This was a cute outfit." He grinned again, and I found myself mirroring him. "Let me pay for the dry cleaning." I shook my head. "Dinner then? Please. I mean, I know where you live." That's only sort of creepy, and now my eyebrows look like peaks. "Yes, but true." "Fine, I'm a human being. I can use food." 7:30, don't be late." He laughed again and nodded his head, backing away half a step at a time. 7:30. I unlocked the main door and trudged up 5 flights of stairs to my studio apartment. I couldn't stop smiling like a freak, even as my coffee-soaked shirt clung to my ribcage with every step. Reaching for the hem, I slid off the wet t-shirt and tossed it into the bathroom sink. Shorts and panties followed, and I stepped into the shower stall, allowing hot water to wash away cold coffee. The two mixed and slid down my thighs, leaving a clean slate of skin in its wake. How'd that coffee come out? We headed down the 5 flights. I don't know, I haven't tried yet. I see. Well, you look really nice, even without all that coffee. I couldn't help but laugh. He tried so hard to be funny. How did the move go? Good, put all his furniture in a U-Haul and drove it up to Queens. We did most of the packing the other day, so it's just the big things today. That's nice of you. Yeah, that's just the kind of guy I am, you know, nice and all. He winked as we headed down the block. Don't forget clumsy. But I'm charming, right? There was that sly snicker again. I don't know if I would use the word charming. Then what would you use? He focused on my face, the way the evening sun accented my features, enhanced my MAC powders and pink lipstick. Flawless. Not one streak out of place or shaky line. He held open the door to a hibachi sit-down restaurant. It was the best Japanese food in Manhattan, so it was always packed with families, groups of business partners and friends, and of course, couples. Even on a Tuesday night, almost every table was occupied. We were seated at a cozy table in the back corner, away from the flaming chaos that was the hibachi grill. We could hear uproars of oohs and ahs as the chef lit some onions on fire, lighting up that section of the restaurant. I peered over at the menu, at Trey. He had beautiful eyes, an earthy green with tiny flecks of brown. They were captivating, like I could see right into them. Each vein and the generous convexity of its shape, I knew not to stare too long or too intensely. Dinner wasn't anything special. We talked about how we made enough money to barely scrape by with increasing New York City rent, and what we did to forget about such issues. He was too enthused when I mentioned modeling. Trey was a corporate man, working his way up the ladder under the infamous glass ceiling. But he was also a volunteer fireman, and his saving lives was pretty sexy. He cared so much about people and protecting them, while I worked to have them fall to their knees. He didn't talk so highly of himself that I wanted to tear him down, and he didn't try that mysterious tactic. But Trey fell for my slight movements. Under exaggerated toss of hair over shoulder, smirk of the eyes, heavy rise and fall of chest, and delicate flexes of hands, simple gestures that made his eyes travel wherever I wanted. Like a gentleman, he grabbed the check and tipped the waiter. I didn't put up a fight only because I don't like to lose. He held the door open as we left and headed in the opposite direction of my apartment. He couldn't simply enjoy the night. He had to brush away silence. So, how would you describe me? What do you mean? I knew what he meant. From before dinner, you said you'd tell me after. Perhaps I'll tell you later. Okay, well, I think you're unpredictable. How so? I thought you wouldn't agree to a date, nor did I think you would have this much of an attitude problem, but then again, that should have been obvious from the start. A date? No one said this was a date. I was pretty sure my face contorted into a sneer at that point. I just hate that word. Date. It seems pretty datish to me, he shrugged. I think you're being optimistic. Why's that? I don't date. He stopped at a brown facade building. It was so nonchalant, like he didn't think I'd realize this wasn't my place, when in reality I've done this many times. I could walk these streets blindfolded and find my way home in minutes. You don't date, huh? Then what do you do? Have fun, meet different people, experience different people. Like I intended, Trey took a step closer to me. What kind of experience are you looking to have? As he placed one hand on my waist and the other on my cheek, I touched my forehead to his. A memorable one. What can I do to make this so? Something different. Exciting. What excites you, Ariel? He asked in a hoarse whisper, both arms around me now, his lips millimeters from mine. I was caught off guard by his question, and I dragged my tongue across my bottom lip, just missing his. No one had ever asked me that, and I didn't know the answer. Men themselves weren't exactly exciting in any way. Jumping into bed with them hadn't been thrilling or even fulfilling as of late. I'm not sure. I felt his breath on my neck. He was so close. Let's find out, he said into my ear. He took my hand with a swift motion and ambled to the front door. As he slid the key in, Trey wrapped his arms around my waist and pressed his lips in the back of my neck. As his hair tickled my skin, I giggled like a teenager, a reaction foreign to me. I felt his teeth nip flesh when he opened the door. He lifted me from the floor before I could take another step and bounded up the stairs with my body in his arms. We kissed with a fervor I knew quite well, the seasoned passion of strangers seeking physical interaction. We made it to his apartment, but he didn't let me down to open the door. Instead, he leaned my back against it, and I wrapped my legs tighter around his torso. He jiggled the key into the lock and then carried me to the bed, but didn't plop me down as men usually did. He set me on my feet by the edge. Without parting our hungry lips, his hands found the smooth skin beneath my shirt. They glided over my hips as he enjoyed the feel of my muscles reacting to his touch. Not a word was said during our time together, the way I liked it. All the words we needed were in the way our bodies collided. I was right. He wasn't selfish. He waited for me to finish with him the only time that had ever happened. It felt natural to me in Trey's arms and underneath his frame. Even as we lay beside one another afterward, I slid closer to his warmth than I usually did. I fell asleep, my cheek on his rising and falling chest and his arm cradling me. The blanket covered both of us. When I woke around 3:30, I squinted to adjust to the darkness of the room. I could make out silhouettes of a TV, dresser, and table. Light danced between the blinds, and I could see an outline of the doorway. I turned to the man beside me. Trey, I recalled. I thought of my coffee-stained shirt soaking in my bathroom sink and his concerned expression when he bumped into me on the sidewalk. I thought of his insistence and his charm and how I haven't given him a word to describe him. My body didn't want to leave his, but I managed to swing my legs over the side of the mattress. I looked back at the man under the sheets, a handsome figure, one worthy of staying until morning, even in the shadows of night. I leaned over and kissed his cheek. With an ounce of hesitation, I pulled myself from the bed and gathered my clothes from the floor. An expert at dressing in the dark, I barely focused on how my limbs controlled the articles of clothing. Instead, I stared at Trey asleep. I didn't want to desert him. In fact, I wanted to see him again. But that wasn't me, nor could it ever be me. With my hand on the doorknob, I looked back once more. I could have crawled under the blanket, snuggled into his welcoming embrace, but I didn't. Dream about me, I whispered into the cool, thin air, and left him behind. Thank you.
So our last reader tonight, I'm really excited to introduce because before I came to Pitt, I wrote part of my undergraduate literature thesis on her work. So if you haven't guessed, it's going to be Lynn Emanuel. So Library Journal just named Lynn's new and selected poems, called The Nerve of It, one of this fall's best books of poetry from an independent press. Between September and April, she will have given 17 readings, including in Los Angeles, Lincoln, Nebraska, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, 4 times in New York City, everywhere from NYU to the KGB bar, Ohio, North Carolina, and Miami, Florida. She is trying to hit every state in the union. Lynn Emanuel.
Choices. Michael Jackson, that was the most conservative. What would happen if I use this? I mean, not what will happen, but how do I use this?
We just turn it on.
No. Just because I'm coughing, and I thought maybe it would be...
It should be on.
Okay. Yeah? It sounds like a rainstorm. Okay. Maybe it's just too much trouble.
Yeah.
No? Okay. As we're preparing this, I'm going to start talking because Sam was very strict with me about the timing of all this. He is very strict. So I can't remember whether it was Jung or Freud, and if you do know this, tell me after the reading. But one of them said, in order to do my work, I need one good friend and one good enemy. And if Jung said it, the good enemy was Freud, and if Freud said it, the good enemy was Jung. So tonight I am reading from my one good enemy, which is prose. And I have to say, is this just distracting? Yeah. Okay. Let me just turn this off. Yeah. Let's just turn it off. Yeah. I'll be okay. I had a cough drop. So a friend of mine proposed a panel for AWP, since AWP is going to be in Los Angeles, on noir poetics, and it was an interesting group of people, pretty unexpected actually. But when I got the proposal, which was badly written and therefore not accepted, I was so dismayed by the description of what noir might be that I immediately started writing a rebuttal. And this is my rebuttal, part of it. It's vignettes, and the placeholder title right now is just called My Noir. And the first sentence is a kind of title in all these pieces. I was writing about my childhood, which happened in black and white, and was oniric, strange, erotic, ambivalent, and cruel. My early poems allude to noir for the same reason my students' poems allude to films of their childhood's lived experience. The feelings, events, even the look of noir, were not only a style, they were actual, they were documentary, archival. On the screen, you got to behold everything that you had beheld. 1961. In preface to a 20-volume suicide note, Leroy Jones asks wearily, when is the end of the Second World War? On the timeline of my life, the Second World War ended only when the Vietnam War began. All of our early lives seethed with the Korean War, the Cold War, which clung to World War II like remora to sharks. At school, I was obliged to participate in duck and cover drills, but also wore military dog tags, which bore, among other things, my name and my religion, J/C, Jewish/Christian, and I wore them for the same reason soldiers do, to identify the body. My mother said, if anything happens, these would let people know my name and how to reunite me with my parents. The war ended in 1945. I was born in 1949 and lived on Cook Street in Denver, Colorado, 2 blocks up and to the right of the Bluebird Theater, where I went to the movies. Across the street were 5 houses of German immigrants who worked in the slaughterhouses. They lived, as we did, in stolid blue-collar homes with dark, cold cement porches and a patch of scabby red limestone sidewalk in front. Some of the men spoke English, and my father, who was Jewish, was a perpetual cloud of bad mood. I became friends with one of their daughters, went to Lutheran church with her and her family, and learned to polka and speak some German. Maria's house was steeped in blonde shadows. The old-fashioned roller blinds were smugly drawn in every room to protect her mother's wax flowers from the sun. At church, I was beguiled by the ceiling's immaculate skies, in which floated creamy clouds and succulent cherubs. My mother's parents owned a hotel on US Route 50 in Nevada. Most of the guests were truckers or civilians on their way to California, transients lost in the middle of nowhere. Some were miners who worked at the Kennecott. Along with the Great Wall of China, the Kennecott mine is one of only 2 man-made objects visible from space, the largest human excavation on Earth, and they're still digging to the rough tune of 100 feet deeper each year. The lobbies and hallways of the Collins Hotel were tiled with black and white linoleum and lit with dim sconces. The rooms contained an iron bedstead, a deal dresser, and a sink. The windows were decked out with the same jaundiced blinds that hung in Maria's windows, and I saw this very room time and again at the movies. The camera seemed to be waiting for me in that empty room. At the diner, breakfasting with my grandfather, egg and steak, blood and yolk on my plate, I am jamming nickels into a slot. Aside from my grandmother, my mother, and the maid, I saw no women at the hotel except for one. I breached her room when the maid cleaned it. I would follow the maid on her rounds, trailing from room to room, a small and avid voyeur with a shaky handheld camera of my attentiveness. Over the end of the unmade bed's iron bedstead hung a battered pair of white underpants, at the core of which was a deep red stain. In my mind, the image is biblical, a shroud with a bloody mark. The smell in the room was powerful. The maid flinched and opened a window, swabbed out the sink, and left. Days later, I saw the woman who lived in that room, wearing men's khaki pants and a flannel shirt, standing in the lobby with my grandfather, who was dropping quarters into her outstretched hand. After that, the window closes forever. Hotels. Before he moved to Denver from the loft on West 10th, my mother and I lived in a tiny duplex on Ivy Street, and before that in 2 rooms in a residential hotel. A window was faced by other windows, identical and inhabited. I still love the feel of entrapment. My mother was a single working mother in the 1950s. World War II had barely ended. There was no child care for families like ours. There were no families like ours. When my mother traveled, I was left with friends, acquaintances, the ill-tempered and resentful family of a cleaning woman, where I slept in a canvas World War II cot used to transport wounded soldiers. Bohemia. But first we'll drive the stations of downtown, pool hall, flop house, jazz joint, jail, whorehouse down Folsom, and the darkest alleys of Larimer, paying respects to Denver's father, lost on the railroad tracks, Allen Ginsberg. Larimer Square, Tokay and bags with twisted necks, and the Platte River, flexuous corridor for my travels, wrote Neil Cassidy. On the basement walls of the Cook Street house, he painted a wilderness of vines and blossoms, despite the smell and the dark, weak spot on the cement floor from a pipe's abiding drift. A young woman in slacks with hot red hair rented it, her breasts sharpened to points by her brassiere. Although windowless, there was a bed down there and some sort of bath, and there were life drawing classes, a nude women in front of rows of men and women, erect before gleaming slabs of white paper set on easels, gripping sticks of dirty charcoal. Several times, Rothko came through Denver on his way to Boulder, and I was spiteful to his daughter in the sandbox, the one where cats left redolent turds breaded with sand. My early poems were often entitled Photograph, but in fact, they were always more filmic than photographic. Not a genre, but a style is the way film historian Thomas Schatz identifies noirs, influenced by cinematic newsreels, which I also saw at the Bluebird, curtains of bombs on London, curtains of bombs on Berlin, and on-location photography. Noirs were typically B movies with low budgets, no professional extras, and were free from big picture constraints. Noirs could get away with more. They could be risque. B films, noirs, empowered me to write B poetry, with characters, situations, and events not possible, I thought, in more classical, decorous, and formal A poetry. When I look back at my early poems, for instance, I think of the figure of my father as a kind of unpaid extra, drafted into the work of these poems. In one, he has to stand beside the high art, abstract, expressionless canvases of Arshile Gorky. I'm almost done.
You're fine. You are totally fine.
At the movies, I identify with the coroner. I enter the body, because everyone and everything we see is a self-portrait. I'm a dead man when I look at a dead man. At the movies, every image is a mirror, every soundtrack is a gun. This is a movie about a man tricked out in muscles, so in the dark theater, I don the breastplate of a hairy chest. There is a mustache, so I duck under the low lintel of the lip, taste ice cubes percussive in a glass of gin. Restless barges swarm the river of my drunkenness. Of all the lives in all the countries of the world, I walk into this one. A phone rings as it is rigged to ring. The snow, like a sentence in a book, struggling through the dark from left to right, looks like it is trying to escape. And we have pockets stuffed with a dirty bolus of $5 bills, and a dog in a yard embossing the black mud with the imprints of her frantic leaping, mechanical, dutiful, uninspired, like a steady job. As a man, I hold my tongue, even though my tongue is wet and mobile as a fish in an aquarium. I stand in the dark. I wait for the inspired freight of my future to arrive, or at least in the dark of the Bluebird Theater. That is the way it looked to me. The present, hotel, near the airport. Now, of course, the appalling now, so clearly here. Jared's jeweler, Amy's spa and nails, Yafei Chinese cuisine. The colors are neurotic, the architecture from Day of the Locusts. I dream of public-private spaces of my childhood, unmythologized and unrepresented except in noir. Deeply empty rooms wreathed in extremities. I am here, weary and situated, days spent editing on the nuclear edge, elaborate new thoughts, arguable notions. So, dear night's indigenous citizens, no nostalgia, only some scraps of writing in a woman's hand, breaking into excessively loving detail. And the dark, sudden as snow, a cat's hiss. Beyond the window, unroomed night downpouring. I have become just another address to visit. A large white square van parked crookedly at the motel door, the cab light on, and a man in a cap urgently writing something on a piece of paper, a refrigeration unit purring in the back. And also, Je me souviens, says the French on the license plates of Quebec. It is 3 a.m. I am one more terrible metaphor. A woman in a dress and heels treads the moody, unlit parking lot, dragging a pink suitcase. Here, at the corner of evening, noises, infants, televisions. And my father died in exile. At that time, I was checking my poems for quality control in Amsterdam. That angry, erotic, nervy girl, red lips, severe skirts, abundant, gay, enormous nonconformity. World, I dispute you, was my motto. Citizen of the temporary, the moving and always moving. I get out of bed, a sweep of light across my ceiling. I've dreamt delicate European sentences, elusive and emptied rooms, echoing stanzas that accommodate their author's undistinguished characters. Among my books, I find this sentence: literature, death without peace. Dear emergency readers, really, I am too much of a Jew to do this work. Thank you.
Okay, yay! So, one more round of applause for all of our lovely readers. Everybody else, though. And also for Classic Lions for having us. Thank you so much. And so concludes the last speakeasy of the semester. So we'll see you back next semester. TBD.